I'm going to precede this review by simply stating that I'm awful at pronunciation. I really am, especially whenever it's things that are out of the ordinary. I'm also going to precede this by saying if you like Opeth, if you like Nachtmystium, if you enjoy avant-garde music in general, as a whole or just as a casual fan, I'm immediately preceding this video by saying you are going to want to check this out. So now that you already know this is going to be a positive review, you might as well stay with me, and you might as well find out why. I'm not going to state the name of the album. I'm going to instead allow the title of the video to instead do that, and it's not out of any disrespect to this band, but it's instead out of respect for them that I do that. Principally because I don't want to tarnish a name of something that has really been a tremendous surprise here in the early going of 2014. Hail Spirit Noir is the name of the band. They are a Greek band, and they are a great purveyor of a mixed up, I guess, version of sounds that include avant-garde, that include black metal, that include progressive metal, that include psychedelia. And this is their second release. Their first release was released in 2012, and it was very critically acclaimed. It was one I unfortunately did not get the opportunity to review, and upon listening to this album, there is a lot of regret in my soul for that. There is a lot of regret in my mind for that, and any person who pushed me in the direction of that album has every right to point at me and say, I told you so. This is an album that's 7 minutes in length, has roughly a 50-minute runtime, and this is definitely not easy listening. I'm going to proceed by saying that simply because it's the truth. This is something that the casual metal fan may not necessarily get into right away. But then again, a number of years ago, bands such as Opeth, bands such as Nachtmystium, bands in the avant-garde persuasion, Modeling of the Well is another name that comes to mind, certainly would not be within the pantheon of easy-to-listen artists. This is certainly one that is able to incorporate that as well. From the opening moments of the very first track on this album, of the song Blood Guru, it becomes very eminent right away that it's going to be a challenge to listen to this, or it will be for some. For an individual such as myself, who has really become very well versed in the avant-garde persuasion, I definitely enjoyed it right away. I enjoyed the fact that it was kind of an assault on your eardrums. You have this, heavily fuzzed out guitar, this very, very direct riff that has you, kind of right in a vice grip for your balls right from the get-go, and then this, this really gargled and muffled, death/black metal style screeching/singing that you have going on here, and growling that just has you kind of transfixed right from the get-go of just what this album is really going to behold. However, that's not even the half of it. Literally, that's not literally the half of it, because the second half of this track descends into prog rock lunacy. Something that you might imagine from a 1970s prog rock album, either that or something that perhaps was lifted from Opeth's heritage. This is certainly where the Opeth worship, or the Opeth allegory, seems to really fancy itself quite nicely, because in these moments there will be many, many, many times where you are able to draw back to Opeth's heritage album, whom some people dislike, but I like, and definitely see a true connection. The psychedelic portion of this album is certainly in various elements. It's in the repetition, it's in the construction of these songs, it's in the way in which there's a very hypnotic nature to some of these tracks, and the way in which the presentation is able to come across to a listener's ears. And this is also an ability that other bands have been able to share. This is not something that is going to immediately seem all of that new for seasoned vets of the avant-garde genre, but it is certainly one that here in 2014 has kind of given avant-garde a nice new face to really perhaps worship in the year 2014. Consider Satanist Time. Consider the repetition that is heard on this song. Consider how it is just, one that really drives the point home. Consider also the true bluntness of Satyr's Orgy, which is Satirico Orgio. And you definitely can understand where some of these elements really come forward. And this is all stuff that's presented with fantastic song structure that is definitely out of the ordinary. It's definitely not something that traditional metal fans are going to see as typical, casual, or run-of-the-mill. This is certainly something that has a lot of individuality to it. This is music that bends and twists and turns in ways that perhaps to some conventional music elite might not make very much sense. However, believe me, whenever you hear the overall whole, it certainly does. The ends do justify the means. And I really have to say this. I have to say that the Mermaid, which is track number 5 on this album, is not only a center point or a centerpiece for this album, but is also one of the early frontrunners here in January of 2014 for Song of the Year, because this is a mammoth journey. 11 minutes, 26 seconds long. You might say, Cover Killer Nation, you seem to really have an affinity for long songs. What the fuck is up with that, man? Well, it's plain and simple. I love long songs because it gives an artist the true ability to expand his horizons, their horizons, her horizons, whatever it may be, and really generate something that is out of the ordinary. It gives them the opportunity to expand their own composition and really go outside of their usual means, unless this is something that they do commonly with almost every track, in order to really build and construct something that has a lot of depth, a lot of layers, maybe tell a story, and really just come across with something that is magnificent. I really find that in longer songs, you tend to hear this happen a lot more often because of A, sometimes their rarity, but also B, because the bands that have a lot of different tools in their toolkit, a lot of different clubs in their golf bag, really have the ability to, on these lengthier tracks, incorporate so many of them that it just leaves you speechless. Once again, you're going to hear a lot of hearkenings back to early prog. You're going to hear some hearkenings back even to maybe even some 60s flower child pop in some locations. But what I really dig about the Mermaid is the fact that it just reminds me of one of those old-fashioned story-based songs, story-based masterpieces that has all of the great tools that really incorporate in fantastic songwriting through storytelling, and the composition is something that really boosts this even further. Really, throughout this album's 50 minutes, you're going to be taken on different thrill rides with each passing track. There's going to be no song that is going to directly feel as though it is just the same as its predecessor. There's going to be elements that you're going to hear multiple times, either that or elements that will feel as though they're more dominant than others. I definitely touch base more so on the prog rock side of that argument because it definitely has a presence that is continuous on this release. However, each individual track is going to have that feeling where it is truly one of a kind, and one of its kind on this album. It's not going to feel as though this is an album that is really riddled and kind of hard-pressed for an identity. This is instead an album that has an identity in the bizarre. It has an identity in the psychedelic. It has an identity within the elements of prog rock, while also still incorporating that dirty, dusty, really, really rugged screaming inside of a coffin black metal side to it that just kind of blends along with all of this to create something that reminds you of bands such as Nachtmystium, that reminds you of bands such as Aarni, that remind you of bands such as Model Into the Well or Into the Woods. It's going to remind you of a lot of different things, and it's going to give you a lot of positive feelings, even though the overall scope of this album is one that is deeply embedded in evil and deeply embedded in negativity. However, the true beauty of this is within the structures of the songs themselves. It's in the passionate songwriting. It's also within the lyrical content. It's also within the storyteller element. There's a lot to really digest, but also a lot to really marvel at whenever you listen to this album from front to back. Ladies and gentlemen, we've reached our first album of 2014 and our first album in this new scoring structure that has eclipsed the 90th percentile. This is one that I have to give a 91 out of 100. I know it's not that big of a jump from 90, but this is an album that has many elements that can be deemed as perfection. However, I do also think that the rawness of some of the vocals, while it does have its place really in this album, can also sometimes offer itself as a bit of a distraction. And the same can also be said for the clean vocals on this album. However, this is something that needs to be understood as a part of avant-garde music. It's a part of this explorative process. It's a part of really trying to do more than just singing words. It's instead trying to convey a theme, trying to convey a feeling, trying to really convey a message. Whether it be a message that's within a greater story, and is just playing its part, or if it is in itself the story, well, that is in the ear of the beholder. And the only one who will truly know for sure is the composer. Check this album out. If you like any of the bands that I've mentioned throughout this review, you absolutely owe it to yourself to check out Hail Spirit Noir. These guys are only 2 albums in, but let me tell you, they have a lot of good things going for them. This is a group that I can definitely see rising up the ranks, and this is one where, even though they're in a sub-genre of metal that may not be for everybody, in fact, I will go out on a limb and say that it's not for everybody, this is certainly one of those names that will, hopefully in the future, always come up whenever you mention bands such as those that I've mentioned previously, Opeth, Nachtmystium, etc. They are definitely co-conspirators in the greater element of avant-garde and truly experimental music. Check this album out, and if you have already, please, what's your favorite track in the comments? Did you enjoy the Mermaid as much as I did? What other bands like this do you really enjoy? And is this something that was for you? For those of you who haven't listened yet or have never heard of this band, was this truly for you? Or was this something that was a little out of your league? Let me know.